Okay, so today we're going to be making some thermite. Now, thermite isn't too hard to make. It's made from two ingredients. There's iron oxide and there's aluminum powder. First, I'm going to be going over how to make iron oxide. It's probably the trickiest to make out of the two. So, first of all, here's my materials. First thing I got here is just plain old water. I got it in a windshield washer bottle. With that water, you're going to need table salt. And this is to make the water an electrolyte, so electricity can flow through it. I got my two electrodes here that I'm going to be using. I'm making an electrolytic cell, which is going to be separating the iron and making iron oxide. First here is an iron. This is just an iron rod. I got it from this here. I just had some iron laying around and it had paint on it, so I had to wire brush it off, and it looks good right now. Second electrode, which is my anode, that's the cathode. This is just pencil lead, just a piece of graphite. It's carbon, and it should work great. I've got a digital scale here, so I can measure out my proportions later on. I've got a hobby transformer here. This is just from a little train set I had downstairs, and I marked off the positive and negative. Positive is going to be hooked up to the iron, and the negative will be hooked up to my carbon. I've got here this mayo jug, and I taped to it two wires here. These are going to be to hold my electrodes, and I'll also be pouring my electrolyte in there. And the last piece I need is the coffee filters, and these are just to filter out the water out from the sludge that'll be making the iron oxide sludge. Okay, so I'm going to make my electrolyte now. I've got my water here. I'm just going to dump some in my container I'm using for the process. This can be plain old tap water. Hot is preferable. This is not hot water that I'm using. But yeah, so I'm just going to dump some in here. Doesn't really matter how much. Near the top, kind of. That should probably be good. And now I'm going to pour in the salt, which will make the water conductive, so the electricity can flow between. Once again, I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. I want it to be not completely saturated. It doesn't need to be, but yeah, I'll just use my stir it up a bit. That's probably good enough for now. Okay, so now I'm going to start hooking up the wires to my cathode and my anode. So I'm going to do my cathode first here. I'm just going to wrap this wire around it. This is a little corroded. I had it dangling in the water earlier. So I'll just kind of spread it out a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap that around this cathode. And I'm going to take some electrical tape and just tape it on there. Alright, there we go. So that's on, and I'm just going to be dangling this right about here when it's going. Okay, now the second one is my carbon. Now this one's significantly shorter, so I will need this one to be dangling in the water a bit. But yeah, same thing. I'm just going to wrap it around, being careful because this will break super easily. And it is a bit of a bitch to strip this down. But, okay. I'll just tape this one over too, though. So that's those two. My two electrodes should be good now. So I'll dangle this one in here as well. And one thing to note is that you don't want them to touch. They shouldn't be touching inside there. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but they aren't touching right now. I'll just need to make sure that electrode doesn't. But it shouldn't. Okay. I'll just cap this off. Now that should be mostly good. I think that's all. Yeah, that's the two materials. So I'm just going to plug in my DC transformer now. And making sure everything's good, I'm just going to boot it up here. So I'm going to turn some current on. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but you can see, well, hopefully you can see at least, it's bubbling. I'll turn the current off. Now there's no volts going through, and it's not bubbling at all. And as soon as I turn it on, as soon as I turn it on, you can see it starts bubbling. Now this is going to be hydrogen gas being released. Also, there will be some chlorine gas in there because I used sodium chloride in the water to make it, you know, an electrolyte. It's not a significant portion. I won't be killing myself, but it is a little bit. But what will be happening here, and you should see it soon enough, the iron will start being sacrificed, and it'll just keep bubbling, and the water will get pretty sludgy soon. and eventually you'll start seeing a precipitate on the bottom, and I'll just let that settle once it is, and that settled precipitate will be filtered later on in my coffee filters. And yeah, so I'm just going to let this sit for a while. It'll keep bubbling, and I'll be back when I see at least some significant change. Okay, so I'm back. I went and had dinner and did other stuff for a little while, and just got back here. And if you look at the top of my iron oxide container here, you can see there's like a rust red, kind of greenish top layer. And that's kind of what you're looking for. That is the sludge that we're later going to be filtering out and refining. And I'll pull out my cathode here, my iron. You can see it's covered in rust as well. It's been, reducing along that. And I'll quickly see if I can give you another angle here. If you look inside there, you can see my graphite anode is still bubbling away. I hope you can see that, but it's still bubbling, and it'd still be producing. And along the bottom here, I've got a whole layer of this, kind of blackish stuff that hasn't yet been exposed to the external environment yet. So that's kind of what you're looking for. It's full of this stuff right now, and I could leave it for a little while, but I think I'll finish this batch off here. And I'm going to quickly show you guys the filtering process. Now, this is a little trickier. It takes a long time to do. But what I'm basically going to be doing is taking containers like this yogurt one here, and I'm going to be using these coffee filters. I'm going to fold them back like this, fold back the edges, and with this, turn this down a bit, and with this, I'll be just kind of placing them on top of this inside here, and then I'll put an elastic band around it. And it should let the water drip through and leave all my iron sludge. Alright. So that one's pretty full. You can see there I topped it up. And it is dripping horribly slow. And it'll just keep getting slower and slower as it fills up more. So that's why I have these two. But that's basically what I'm going to be doing for a little while. Just slowly pouring it in as I go. You can see it will take a little while to fill or pour all of this, because I got quite a bit here. But it should actually make quite a bit of iron oxide. Okay, so I let the iron oxide sit around and drip out in these cups here. I've already done 2 of them, but if you can look in here, you can see where there was normally water and where it was filled up with water. It emptied out, slowly went through the coffee filter here. Just water in the pan, so I didn't lose any iron. It's just the sludge remaining here. And what I'm going to be doing now is actually scraping the sludge out of this onto some parchment paper and some wax paper. I'm using both right now because I'm not quite sure which one is going to be, better for it. So here we go. So I got one of the filters here, and I'm going to take it over, and I'm just going to rip it like this, and I'm going to start scraping because it dries much better on wax paper than it would on this coffee filter, because when it's on the coffee filter, it's just gonna, it's papery, so you're gonna get chunks of paper in the iron oxide, which just won't have as good of a reaction. So I'm just gonna scrape it all down here. And there we have it. So I'm just going to spread this out a little bit, and so it'll dry better. I just got to leave this overnight here. And when it dries in the morning, it should be like a reddish kind of paste on this paper. And from that point, I can scrape it off once more, and then I'll have my powder, and we'll be set. All right, so I let the iron oxide dry for a day, and as you can see, we're left with this really crusty stuff here. It is really dry, which is nice. And what I'm now going to do is take this razor blade here, and I'm going to scrape it off and eventually collect it in this little container here. So we'll start doing that. Alright, so last we left off, I was scraping some iron oxide out of parchment paper. And, I got around 6 grams from that after running it for about an hour or 2 hours or something. And I decided, that was cool, but not quite enough. So I decided I'd let my electrolytic cell run overnight. And come the morning, I turned it off, pulled out the electrodes, and you can see this is what has become of my iron electrode. It is just rusted to shit. And in the middle, it's actually much skinnier. It's covered in rust, and the tip is actually quite sharp. That's just because of the anode had the most electrical access to the tip of it there. But that's what's become of my cathode. and I'll quickly show you this powder that I've collected. Now, I let it dry, I let it filter out here, and after drying for a little while, this is what I've been left with. You can see there's just a whole pile of powder here. There's just, I don't even know how much there is, but what I've been doing is smushing it up with this hammer here. As it is rust, it's really easy to smush. I just have to run the hammer along it or crush it like so. But what I'm going to do now is actually weigh it, see exactly how much we have, and that will tell me exactly how much, aluminum I'm going to need to grind up. Keep in mind, I'm not going to burn all of this here, because this amount of powder, I'd be concerned about burning a hole in my floor. So I'm just going to use a scale here, tare it, and we're going to start dumping this here sheet of powder into it. Look at all that. Alright. Just going to tap it. Okay, so if you can see that there, it says 19.4. So we got 19.4 grams of powder. Now with a 75 to 25% proportions that I need, it'll make around 28 to 30 grams of thermite if I used all of that powder. Obviously I'm not going to do that. It's a horrible idea. But that's what we've been left with for powder. Now I was going to use this little tiny container here to dump all my iron oxide. You can see this is the iron oxide I collected from my previous experiments, but obviously that's not going to quite work, so I'm going to need to find a bigger container. But yeah, so that's the iron oxide I'm going to be using here. You can see I have a whole bunch of it. And next I think we'll start grinding down the aluminum. Alright, so I just finished getting all my aluminum powder made, and you can see here this is what I used, my stair protector, and I just used a hand file. And I just ground down this little part right here, if you can see that. And I ended up dumping it all into this one. Now, it doesn't look like much, but it is enough for what I'll be making. I won't be making too much thermite. So, yeah, so that's the step right now. We're going to make the actual thermite. Now, thermite is 75% iron oxide to 25% aluminum. So, I'll be using my scale. That's by mass. And I'll be using my scale here to measure that out. And, yeah, so I'll just turn it on here and tare it. Okay, so now I'm going to start pouring my iron oxide. And we're going to be making a 6-gram sample, so we'll need 4.5 grams of iron oxide to 1.5 grams of aluminum. So here we go. There we go, 4.5, 4.6. All right, well, it's close enough. It's kind of ballpark, but that's enough. You can see we have tons of iron oxide left. I don't plan on making too big of a sample. I could, but I won't be. Alright, so that's my 4.5 grams of iron oxide. Next, we're going to do my aluminum. Now, I'll quickly tare it again. And we got 1.5 this time. 1.5, there we go. Alright, so 1.5 grams. We'll pour it onto the same sheet here. And we got the two of them next to each other. Now what I'm going to be doing is actually mixing them together. So, take this out of this pan and put it over here. What I'm going to do is just kind of fold this paper like this to get kind of like a generalized mix together. And, alright. Here. Now I'm just going to take this hammer here, kind of smush along it just to get a better mix going on. You can see it's starting to kind of go together a little more. We'll just keep going that up. And I'm going to actually mix it quite well. Make sure that it's nice. This is really nice fine powder that I made for both of them, which is awesome. But yeah, so that's how to make thermite. Thanks for watching.